The copper coin clinked against the wooden bowl with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the bustling marketplace, and Kara felt her entire world narrow to the retreating back of the human man, who had just given her charity without even looking at her face. She stared down at the single copper piece, resting among the few other coins she had collected that morning, her green fingers trembling slightly as they gripped the edges of the bowl. Most people who dropped coins into her bowl at least made eye contact, even if it was just to confirm to themselves that they were good people helping the less fortunate. Some spat insults along with their charity. Others hurried past with their children, warning them not to get too close to the orc girl. But this man, this tall human with dark hair and broad shoulders clad in a worn leather coat, had simply dropped his coin and continued walking as if she were no different from any other beggar on the street. That casual indifference struck something deep in her chest. Not pity, not disgust, just the simple acknowledgement that she needed help and he had something to give. Nothing more, nothing less. Kara scrambled to her feet, her ragged skirt tangling around her legs as she clutched the bowl to her chest. She did not know what compelled her to follow him. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the fact that no one in this frontier town had shown her even that much basic human decency in the 3 weeks since her clan had cast her out. Perhaps it was desperation for any connection that did not involve hatred or fear. The man walked with purpose through the market square, his boots leaving prints in the muddy street. Kara followed at a distance, ducking between carts and vendor stalls, her pointed ears catching fragments of conversation as merchants haggled with customers. The autumn air was crisp and carried the scent of roasting meat and fresh bread, reminding her that she had eaten nothing but scraps for days. He stopped at a vegetable stand and purchased a sack of potatoes, exchanging quiet words with the elderly woman running the stall. Kara watched from behind a barrel of apples as he counted out coins with careful precision, then tucked the sack under one arm and continued on his way. She followed. The town of Millbrook sat at the edge of the frontier, where human settlements gave way to the wild forests and mountains that had belonged to orc clans for generations. The tension between the two peoples ran deep here, fed by decades of skirmishes and raids. Kara's own clan had been one of the more peaceful ones, preferring to trade rather than fight, but even they had viewed humans with suspicion. When she had argued against a planned raid on a human farmstead, when she had dared to suggest that perhaps coexistence was possible, the elders had called her traitor and exile. They had stripped her of her place among them and sent her away with nothing but the clothes on her back. The man turned down a side street, and Kara hurried to keep him in sight. She was not sure what she would do if he noticed her following him. She had no plan beyond this strange compulsion to keep him in her field of vision, as if his casual kindness was a lifeline she could not bear to release. They left the town proper, following a dirt road that wound between fenced pastures and small farmsteads. The man never looked back, never gave any indication that he knew he was being followed. Kara kept her distance, moving from tree to tree when cover was available, walking openly when it was not. Her feet, wrapped in cloth bindings that had worn through in several places, ached with every step. The sun had climbed high in the sky by the time the man turned onto a narrow path that led to a small homestead set back from the main road. Kara paused at the edge of the property, suddenly uncertain. Following someone through town was one thing. Following them to their home was something else entirely. But before she could decide whether to turn back, the man stopped and turned around. "You have been following me for nearly 2 miles," he said, his voice calm and even. "You might as well come up to the house instead of lurking by the fence." Kara froze, her heart hammering in her chest. She had been certain he had not noticed her. For a long moment she considered running, but her legs felt like lead and her pride, battered as it was, would not allow her to flee. Instead, she lifted her chin and walked forward, clutching her bowl like a shield. Up close, she could see that the man was perhaps 30 years old, with weathered skin that spoke of long days working outdoors. His eyes were a deep brown, and they studied her with neither hostility nor pity, just that same calm assessment he had probably given the potatoes at the market. "I did not mean to intrude," Kara said, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. Orcs had deeper voices than humans, and hers had always been particularly gravelly. "I will go." "Why were you following me?" he asked, making no move to enter his house or to send her away. Kara struggled to find words that would not make her sound pathetic or desperate, even though she was both. "You gave me a coin," she finally said. "You did not look at me like I was a monster." Something shifted in the man's expression, a softening around his eyes. "I am Brennan Ashford," he said, "and you look more hungry than monstrous. When did you last eat?" The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Kara blinked hard against the sudden burning in her eyes. "2 days ago, maybe 3, I found some bread behind a bakery." Brennan nodded slowly, then gestured toward the house. "Come inside, I will make lunch." Every instinct Kara had screamed that this was a trap, that humans did not simply invite orc girls into their homes and offer them food. But her stomach was a knot of desperate hunger, and there was something in Brennan's steady gaze that made her want to trust him. She followed him up the path and through the door of his small but well-maintained home. The interior was simple and clean, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed in the corner. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books and tools. Brennan set his sack of potatoes on the table and moved to the fireplace, where he began building up the fire that had burned down to embers. Kara stood awkwardly by the door, unsure what to do with herself. She had never been inside a human home before. Everything felt foreign and strange, from the way the floorboards creaked under her feet to the faint smell of wood smoke and herbs that permeated the air. "Sit," Brennan said, nodding toward one of the chairs. "You look ready to collapse." She was. Kara sank into the chair and set her bowl on the table, her hands still trembling slightly. She watched as Brennan moved around the small kitchen area with practiced efficiency, cutting bread and cheese, slicing an apple, filling a cup with water from a pitcher. He set the simple meal in front of her, then took the other chair and watched as she stared at the food. "Eat," he said gently. "I promise it is not poisoned or hexed or whatever you are worried about." Kara grabbed the bread and tore into it with her teeth, her small tusks making the action a bit awkward but no less desperate. The bread was fresh and soft, and she had to fight back a sob at the simple pleasure of having real food in her mouth. She forced herself to slow down, to chew properly, but it was hard when her body was screaming for sustenance. Brennan ate his own portion quietly, not commenting on her obvious desperation. When she had finished everything on the plate and drained the cup of water, he refilled it without being asked and set more bread and cheese in front of her. "Thank you," Kara managed between bites. "I do not understand why you are doing this." "Because you are hungry and I have food," Brennan said simply. "It does not require more explanation than that. I am an orc, I noticed. Humans hate orcs. Some do." Brennan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I have never seen much point in hating someone just because they are different. Life is hard enough without making enemies of everyone who does not look like you." Kara studied him, trying to understand this strange human who spoke of tolerance as if it were common sense rather than radical philosophy. "Why do you live alone out here?" she asked. My wife died 3 years ago, Brennan said, and though his voice remained steady, Kara could hear the old pain beneath the words. Fever took her in the space of a week. I stayed here because this was our home, and leaving felt like losing her twice. I am sorry, Kara said and meant it. And you? Brennan asked. How does an orc girl end up begging in a human town? So Kara told him. She explained about her clan, about the disagreement that had led to her exile, about the 3 weeks she had spent wandering between towns, trying to survive on charity and scraps. She told him about the humans who had spat at her, the merchants who had chased her away from their stalls, the children who had thrown rocks. She told him about the loneliness that felt like a physical weight on her chest, the fear that she would die alone and unmissed in this hostile land. Brennan listened without interrupting, his expression grave. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out at his small plot of land. Winter is coming, he said. In another month the snows will start. You will not survive out there alone. Kara knew he was right. She had been trying not to think about winter, about the killing cold that would descend on the frontier. I will find somewhere, she said, though she had no idea where. Stay here, Brennan said, turning to face her. I have more space than I need, and the work of maintaining this place is more than one person can easily manage. You can help with the chores in exchange for room and board. When spring comes, you can decide what you want to do. Kara stared at him, certain she had misheard. You would let me stay. Here with you, if you want to. You do not know me. I could be a thief or dangerous. Are you? No, but then I do not see the problem. Brennan crossed his arms, a hint of amusement touching his features. Unless you do not want to stay. I want to stay, Kara said quickly, almost desperately. I do. But why would you risk this? If your neighbors find out you are housing an orc, they will turn on you. My nearest neighbor is half a mile away and he minds his own business, Brennan said. I am not worried about what people think. Are you going to stay or not? Yes, Kara said, and felt something loosen in her chest, some terrible tension she had been carrying since the day of her exile. Yes, I will stay. That first afternoon passed in a strange fog of unreality. Brennan showed Kara around the property, pointing out the chicken coop, the small barn where he kept a milk cow and an old plow horse, the vegetable garden that had mostly finished producing for the season. He explained the rhythm of daily life on the homestead, the animals to be fed, the eggs to be collected, the endless maintenance that kept a farm running. Kara absorbed it all, grateful for the distraction from her own churning thoughts. As evening approached, Brennan handed her a blanket and a spare pillow. You can sleep by the fire tonight, he said. Tomorrow, I will set up a proper sleeping area. I have some old canvas I can use to make a partition, give you some privacy. I do not need privacy, Kara said. I am used to sleeping with my clan, all of us together in the longhouse. Even so. Brennan's tone was firm but kind. You are a woman and I am a man, and it is only proper that you have your own space. That night, lying on the floor in front of the banked fire with a full stomach and a roof over her head, Kara felt tears slide silently down her cheeks. She could not remember the last time she had felt safe. She fell asleep listening to the sound of Brennan's quiet breathing from across the room and the crackle of the dying fire. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that felt both strange and comforting. Kara woke each morning before dawn, a habit from her time with the clan, and found that Brennan was already up, stoking the fire and preparing a simple breakfast. They ate together in companionable silence, then went about their separate tasks for the day. Kara threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised them both. She was stronger than Brennan, as most orcs were stronger than most humans, and she could lift loads that would have strained his back. She repaired the sagging fence around the chicken coop, hauled water from the well without complaint, and split enough firewood to last them through the winter. The physical labor felt good after weeks of listless wandering, and she took pride in seeing the results of her efforts. Brennan, for his part, treated her with consistent kindness but never pity. He corrected her when she did something wrong, praised her when she did something well, and shared his meals with her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He was a quiet man, not given to unnecessary chatter, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. One evening, about 3 weeks after Kara had arrived, they sat together at the table after supper, and Brennan pulled out a battered book. "Can you read?" he asked. Kara shook her head. "My clan had no use for human letters. We kept our history in songs and stories." "Would you like to learn?" The offer surprised her. "Why would you teach me?" "Because winter nights are long and dark, and reading helps pass the time." Brennan opened the book to the first page. "Besides, everyone should know how to read. Knowledge is power, as they say." So Brennan began teaching her letters, spending an hour each evening pointing out words and sounding them out slowly. Kara proved to be a quick study, her sharp mind grasping the patterns and rules with surprising speed. She liked the way Brennan's voice softened when he read aloud, liked the feeling of sitting close to him at the table with their heads bent over the same page. It was during one of these lessons that Kara realized she was starting to feel something more than gratitude toward Brennan. She became aware of the way her pulse quickened when their hands accidentally brushed, the way she found excuses to stand close to him during their daily work. It terrified her. She had no business developing feelings for a human man, a man who had shown her kindness when no one else would. He deserved better than to be burdened with the affection of an exiled orc girl. She tried to push the feelings down, to focus on the practical aspects of their arrangement. But it became harder as the days grew shorter and colder, as the first snows began to fall, and they spent more time inside the small house together. She noticed things about Brennan she had not noticed before: the way he hummed softly while cooking, the gentleness with which he handled the animals, the sadness that sometimes crossed his face when he thought she was not looking. One morning in early winter, Kara woke to find several inches of snow on the ground and more falling steadily from a gray sky. Brennan was already up, layering on extra clothing in preparation for checking on the animals. "Stay inside," he told her. "The storm looks bad. I will take care of the barn." But Kara was not about to let him go out into the blizzard alone. She pulled on the heavy coat. Brennan had given her one that had belonged to his late wife, though neither of them had spoken of that fact, and followed him out into the swirling snow. The wind cut through the layers of clothing, and visibility was reduced to just a few feet. They made their way to the barn by feel and memory, leaning on each other for support against the wind. Inside the barn, the animals were restless but unharmed. Brennan and Kara worked together to ensure they had enough food and water to last through the storm, then stood in the relative warmth of the barn, catching their breath. "You should have stayed inside," Brennan said, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "You should not go out alone in weather like this," Kara countered. "What if you fell and hit your head? What if you got lost between here and the house? I would not know until it was too late." Brennan looked at her for a long moment, snow melting in his dark hair. "You are worried about me." "Of course I am worried about you," Kara said, frustration creeping into her voice. "You are the only person in this entire region who has shown me any kindness. You have given me food and shelter and safety. Why would I not worry about you? Is that the only reason?" The question hung in the air between them. Kara felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She could lie, deflect, change the subject, or she could be honest the way Brennan had been honest with her from the beginning. "No," she said quietly. "That is not the only reason." Brennan took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body despite the cold. "Kara," he said, his voice low and careful, "I need you to be clear about what you are saying. Because if you mean what I think you mean, then I need to tell you that I have been fighting my own feelings for weeks now, and I do not want to assume something that is not there." Kara's breath caught in her throat. "What feelings?" "I care about you," Brennan said simply. "More than I should, given that you have only been here a few months. But you are brave and strong and kind, and every day I wake up grateful that you followed me home that day in the market. And if I am reading this wrong, please tell me now before I make a fool of myself." "You are not reading it wrong," Kara whispered. "I care about you too. I have tried not to. You are human and I am an orc, and this can only end badly for both of us, but I cannot help it." Brennan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and cupped her face in his work-roughened hands. His touch was gentle, reverent even, and Kara felt herself leaning into it despite every voice in her head telling her this was dangerous, this was foolish, this would only lead to heartbreak. "Maybe it does not have to end badly," Brennan said. "Maybe we can figure this out together." Then he kissed her, soft and tentative, and Kara felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip the front of his coat, anchoring herself to him. The kiss was sweet and searching, full of all the things they had not said, all the longing they had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kara rested her forehead against his. "This is insane," she said. "Probably," Brennan agreed. "But I have been lonely for a very long time, and you walked into my life like an answer to a prayer I did not know I was making. I am not going to turn away from that just because it is complicated. Your neighbors do not care about my neighbors. The town will turn on you if they find out. Then we will be careful." Brennan pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. "Unless you do not want this, I will not force you into something you are not ready for. We can go back to how things were if that is what you prefer." Kara thought about going back, about pretending these feelings did not exist, about the careful distance she would have to maintain. Then she thought about Brennan's kindness, his steady presence, the way he looked at her like she mattered. She thought about how alive she felt when she was near him, how the loneliness that had plagued her since her exile faded to nothing in his presence. "I want this," she said firmly. "I want you. I am just afraid." "I am afraid too," Brennan admitted. "But I think the things worth having are usually a little frightening." They stayed in the barn for a while longer, holding each other and talking quietly as the storm raged outside. Eventually, they had to make the treacherous journey back to the house, but they did it together, hands clasped tightly, supporting each other through the wind and snow. The storm lasted 3 days, and in that time, Kara and Brennan existed in a small bubble of warmth and intimacy. They slept side by side in front of the fire, talked late into the night about their pasts and their hopes for the future, and shared tentative kisses that grew bolder as they learned the shape and taste of each other. Kara told Brennan about her childhood in the clan, about the traditions and rituals that had shaped her. Brennan told Kara about his late wife, about their plans to build a larger farm, about the grief that had hollowed him out after her death. "I thought I would never feel this way about anyone again," Brennan confessed one night as they lay tangled together under a pile of blankets. "I thought that part of my life was over." "Do you feel guilty?" Kara asked. "About moving on?" "A little," Brennan admitted. "But I think she would want me to be happy. She always said I had too much love in my heart to spend it all on her. I think she would have liked you, even though I am an orc." She was not like most people. She saw the good in everyone. Brennan pressed a kiss to Kara's forehead. I think that is why I loved her. And I think that is part of why I am falling in love with you. You both have this fierce kindness, this refusal to hate the world even when it has hurt you. Kara's breath caught at his words. You are falling in love with me. Is that all right? She kissed him instead of answering, pouring all of her feelings into the press of her lips against his. When they broke apart, she whispered, I am falling in love with you too. I did not think it was possible, but I am. Winter deepened, and their secret relationship deepened with it. They were careful in town, never acknowledging their connection beyond that of employer and worker. Brennan would go to market alone, always coming back with small gifts for Kara, ribbons for her hair, a new pair of boots, a book of poetry he thought she would enjoy. Kara stayed at the homestead, caring for the animals and maintaining the property, and tried not to think about what would happen when spring came and their isolation ended. But winter could not last forever. As the days began to lengthen and the snow started to melt, Kara felt a growing sense of dread. She knew that their relationship would become harder to hide once Brennan's neighbors started visiting again, once the roads cleared and travel became easier. She knew that someone would eventually notice the way Brennan looked at her, the way she looked at him, the care they took with each other. The reckoning came on a mild day in early spring when Brennan's neighbor, a gruff farmer named Thomas, rode up to the homestead unannounced. Kara was in the garden, turning over soil in preparation for planting when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. She looked up to see Thomas dismounting near the house, and her blood ran cold. Brennan came out to greet Thomas, his expression carefully neutral. Thomas, what brings you out this way? Wanted to check on you after the winter, Thomas said, his eyes already fixed on Kara. See, you have got yourself some help. That the orc girl who was begging in town last fall. Yes, Brennan said simply. She needed work and I needed help. It made sense. Thomas spat on the ground. You are keeping an orc on your property. Are you out of your mind? They are savages, Brennan. Dangerous. She has been nothing but helpful, Brennan said, his voice taking on an edge. She works hard, causes no trouble, and has made my life considerably easier. I fail to see the problem. The problem is that she is an orc, Thomas said, raising his voice. You cannot trust them. They will turn on you the moment it is convenient. Everyone knows that. Kara stood frozen in the garden, her hands clenched around the hoe she had been using. She wanted to defend herself, to argue, but she knew that anything she said would only make things worse. So she stayed silent and let Brennan speak for her. Kara has been living here for months, Brennan said, his voice cold now. If she wanted to harm me, she has had plenty of opportunity. The fact that I am standing here having this conversation should tell you everything you need to know about her character. You are a fool, Thomas said flatly. Mark my words, this will end badly, and when it does, do not come crying to me for help. He rode off without another word, leaving Brennan standing in the yard with his fists clenched. Kara set down the hoe and walked over to him, her heart aching at the tension in his shoulders. He will tell people, she said quietly. By this time tomorrow, everyone will know you are keeping an orc here. Let them know, Brennan said. I am not ashamed of you, Kara. I am not going to hide you away like you are something dirty. But your reputation, I do not care about my reputation. I care about you. Brennan turned to face her, taking her hands in his. I love you. I want to build a life with you. And if that means some of my neighbors stop speaking to me, then so be it. You are worth more to me than their approval. Kara felt tears prick at her eyes. I love you too, she said. But I do not want you to suffer because of me. Then you underestimate how much happiness you bring me, Brennan said softly. Whatever happens, we will face it together. Thomas did indeed spread the word, and the reaction was about what they had expected. Some of Brennan's neighbors stopped acknowledging him in town. The merchant who usually sold him supplies at a fair price suddenly found excuses to charge him more. The local minister preached a sermon about the dangers of consorting with savages, his eyes fixed pointedly on Brennan throughout. But there were also unexpected allies. The elderly woman who ran the vegetable stand in the market, the one Brennan had patronized for years, publicly defended him to anyone who would listen. A young couple who farmed land on the other side of Millbrook rode out to the homestead to express their support. Even Thomas, grudgingly, admitted that if Brennan was determined to be a fool, at least he was a consistent fool. Through it all, Kara and Brennan held tight to each other. They worked side by side as spring turned to summer, planting crops and repairing winter damage. They spent their evenings reading together, or talking, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the way long-term couples do, and found that they fit together in ways neither had expected. One evening in midsummer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Brennan turned to Kara with a serious expression. "I want to marry you," he said without preamble. "I know that is probably not possible legally or religiously, but I want you to know that in my heart you are already my wife. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Kara felt her breath catch in her throat. "You would marry me?" "Even knowing what it would cost you?" "It would not cost me anything," Brennan said. "It would give me everything. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. I cannot imagine my life without you in it." "Then yes," Kara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you in whatever way we can." They clasped hands, sitting together as the last light faded from the sky, and made promises to each other that needed no minister or official to make them binding. Brennan promised to love Kara and stand by her against whatever challenges came their way. Kara promised to build a life with Brennan, to be his partner and companion through whatever years they were given. "I have nothing to give you as a wedding gift," Kara said. "No ring, no dowry, nothing of value." "You have already given me everything," Brennan said. "You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning again. You gave me hope. That is worth more than any ring." But the truth was that their happiness made them a target. Not everyone in Millbrook was content to simply disapprove from a distance. There were those who saw Brennan's relationship with an orc as a personal affront, a threat to the established order. And as summer wore on, that resentment began to fester into something more dangerous. The first incident was small. Someone left a dead rat on their doorstep. Unpleasant, but easy enough to dispose of. Then came the broken fence rails, the spooked chickens, the anonymous note shoved under their door warning Brennan to send the orc away before something bad happened. Brennan reported each incident to the local constable, who promised to look into it but made no real effort to find the culprit. Kara wanted to leave, to remove herself as the source of danger, but Brennan refused to hear it. "This is our home," he said firmly. "I am not letting fear drive us out." The situation came to a head on a hot August night. Kara woke to the smell of smoke and sat up in a panic. Brennan was already on his feet, rushing to the window. "The barn," he said, his voice tight with fear. "Someone set fire to the barn." They both ran outside in their nightclothes, Brennan grabbing a bucket as they went. The barn was engulfed in flames, the fire roaring and spitting sparks into the night sky. Kara could hear the terrified screams of the animals trapped inside, and without thinking, she ran toward the burning structure. "Kara, no," Brennan shouted, but she was already moving. The heat was intense, singeing the hair on her arms as she kicked open the barn door. Inside, the smoke was thick and choking. She could barely see, but she could hear the cow bellowing in terror and the horse kicking at its stall. She grabbed the cow first, dragging it by its halter toward the door, then went back for the horse. The animal was wild with fear, rearing and thrashing, but Kara used all her orcish strength to force it out of the barn and into the yard. By the time she staggered out of the burning structure for the last time, coughing and gasping for air, Brennan had managed to start a bucket brigade with neighbors who had seen the flames from a distance. They worked frantically to keep the fire from spreading to the house, but the barn was a total loss. It collapsed inward with a shower of sparks, taking with it most of their tools and all of their stored hay. When the fire was finally out and the last of the neighbors had gone home, Brennan and Kara stood in the yard, covered in soot and ash, surveying the damage. The animals were safe, huddled together in the fenced pasture, but everything else was gone. Who would do this? Kara whispered, her voice raw from smoke. "I do not know," Brennan said, "but we will find out." The answer came the next day when Thomas rode up, his expression grim. "I heard about the fire," he said without preamble, "and I heard who set it." "Who?" Brennan demanded. "Young Marcus Hale and his friends. They have been drinking and working themselves up, talking about how you are betraying humanity by keeping an orc. Last night, they decided to do something about it." Thomas looked uncomfortable. Marcus's father turned him in to the constable this morning. The boy confessed to everything. Brennan felt rage surge through him, hot and fierce. "He could have killed us. He could have killed the animals." "I know," Thomas said. "And for what it is worth, I am sorry. I may not approve of your choices, but arson is beyond the pale. Marcus will face justice." After Thomas left, Brennan turned to Kara, who had been silent throughout the conversation. "Are you all right?" "No," Kara said honestly. "I am angry and hurt and scared, but mostly I am tired. Tired of people hating me just for existing, tired of putting you in danger." "You did not put me in danger," Brennan said fiercely. "Marcus Hale did. That is on him, not you. But if I were not here, if you were not here, my life would be empty and meaningless," Brennan interrupted. "Do not let their hatred win, Kara. We are stronger than they are. We will rebuild the barn. We will keep living our lives, and eventually they will either accept us or leave us alone." Kara wanted to believe him, but it was hard when everything felt so fragile. Still, she nodded and leaned into his embrace, taking what comfort she could from his solid presence. The trial of Marcus Hale became the talk of Millbrook. The young man was unrepentant, declaring loudly in court that he had been defending humanity from monsters. But the judge was unmoved, sentencing him to a year of hard labor and ordering his father to pay restitution to Brennan for the destroyed barn. It was not enough to undo the damage, but it was something. In the aftermath of the fire, something unexpected happened. More of the community began to side with Brennan and Kara. They had seen the young orc woman risk her life to save the animals from the burning barn, had watched her work tirelessly to help rebuild what had been destroyed. It was harder to see her as a monster when she was so clearly brave and selfless. The elderly vegetable vendor organized a fundraising effort to help Brennan rebuild the barn. Neighbors who had previously avoided the homestead showed up with lumber and tools, offering their labor. Even the minister, after much soul-searching, came to apologize for his harsh sermon and to offer his blessing to the couple. "I have been thinking a great deal about the nature of love and acceptance," the minister said as he sat at their rebuilt table. "And I have come to realize that my prejudice was blinding me to what was right in front of me. You two care for each other deeply, and that love has made you both better people. Who am I to condemn that?" "Does this mean you will marry us?" Brennan asked carefully. The minister hesitated. "Legally, I cannot perform a marriage between a human and an orc. The laws are very clear on that point, but I can offer you a blessing if you wish, a recognition in the eyes of the divine, if not the eyes of the law. It was more than they had dared to hope for. On a crisp autumn day, exactly 1 year after Kara had followed Brennan home from the market, they stood in front of the minister and a small gathering of friends and made their vows again. This time, there were witnesses. This time, there was community support. This time, it felt real and permanent in a way that their private promises had not. Kara wore a simple dress that one of the neighbor women had helped her sew, and Brennan wore his best shirt and trousers. They exchanged rings that Brennan had commissioned from the local blacksmith, simple bands of iron that fit perfectly on their fingers. The minister spoke words of blessing and encouragement, and when he told them they could seal their union with a kiss, they did so to the applause of those gathered. It was not perfect. There were still those in Millbrook who disapproved, who muttered about unnatural unions and the corruption of human values. But Kara and Brennan had learned to tune out those voices, to focus instead on the life they were building together. That winter was easier than the one before, with a new barn full of supplies and a community that had, mostly, come to accept them. Kara and Brennan settled into married life with the ease of people who had already been partners in every way that mattered. They worked together, ate together, slept tangled in each other's arms, and planned for a future that stretched out before them full of possibility. One evening in late winter, as they sat by the fire reading, Kara set down her book and looked at Brennan with a serious expression. "I have been thinking about the future," she said. "Oh," Brennan closed his own book, giving her his full attention. "I want to find a way to help other orcs like me," Kara said. "Ones who have been exiled or who want to leave their clans but have nowhere to go. I want to create a place where they can find safety and acceptance." Brennan considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "We have the land for it, and if we built another house, a smaller one, we could offer shelter to those who need it. It would not be easy. It might bring more trouble down on us." "I know," Kara said, "but I keep thinking about how lost and desperate I was before you helped me. How many others are out there feeling the same way? If we could help even a few of them, would it not be worth it?" "Yes," Brennan said without hesitation. "It would be worth it. We will do it together." And so they began laying plans for what they started calling the way station. It would be a place of refuge for displaced orcs, a halfway house where they could stay while they figured out their next steps. Brennan and Kara would provide food, shelter, and help with finding work or housing in the community. It was ambitious and risky, but they both felt called to it. The way station opened its doors the following spring, and within a month, they had their first resident, a young orc man named Grom, who had fled his clan after refusing to participate in a raid. He was sullen and mistrustful at first, but Kara's patient kindness and Brennan's steady acceptance slowly broke through his defenses. They helped him find work at a nearby farm, taught him to read and write, and gave him the space to heal from his trauma. More orcs followed. Some stayed only a few weeks before moving on to other opportunities. Others stayed longer, becoming part of the extended community that grew up around the homestead. Not everyone in Millbrook was happy about it, but enough people had come to trust Brennan and Kara that the opposition was more grumbling than active resistance. 2 years after their wedding, Kara woke one morning feeling nauseated and exhausted. She tried to ignore it, going about her daily tasks, but the symptoms persisted. It took her nearly a week to realize what was happening, and when she did, she was both thrilled and terrified. She told Brennan that evening, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "I am pregnant," she said quietly. Brennan's eyes went wide, then filled with tears. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a healer. But yes, I think so." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "This is the best news," he said, his voice choked with emotion. We are going to have a child. Are you not worried, Kara asked, about what people will say, about whether the child will be accepted? I am terrified, Brennan admitted, but I am also so happy I can barely breathe. We will figure it out just like we have figured out everything else. The pregnancy was difficult. Orc women were built to carry strong children, but the mix of human and orc blood created complications that neither of them had anticipated. Kara was sick frequently in the early months, and as she grew larger, she struggled with pain in her back and hips. Brennan was attentive and supportive, taking over many of her usual tasks and making sure she rested as much as possible. The local midwife, a practical woman named Martha, agreed to attend the birth despite her initial reservations. "I have never delivered a half-orc baby before," she said bluntly. "But a baby is a baby, and every mother deserves care during labor." Kara went into labor on a warm summer evening, and it was every bit as painful and exhausting as she had feared. Brennan stayed by her side throughout, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. Martha worked with calm efficiency, coaching Kara through each contraction. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning, and there were moments when Kara thought she might not survive it. But finally, as the sun climbed high in the sky, their daughter was born. She came into the world screaming lustily, her small fists waving in the air. Martha cleaned her and wrapped her in a soft blanket, then placed her in Kara's exhausted arms. The baby was perfect. She had Brennan's dark hair and Kara's green skin, though it was a lighter shade than her mother's. Her ears were slightly pointed, her features a beautiful blend of both her parents. She was tiny and fierce, and Kara fell instantly and completely in love. "What should we name her?" Brennan asked, his voice full of wonder as he looked down at his daughter. "Hope," Kara said without hesitation. "Because that is what she represents. Hope for a better future." "Hope Ashford," Brennan said, testing the name. "I like it." The birth of Hope marked a turning point in the community's acceptance of Kara and Brennan's relationship. It was one thing to disapprove of an interspecies couple in the abstract. It was quite another to be faced with an actual child, innocent and helpless, who needed the protection and support of the community. Most people, when confronted with baby Hope's sweet face, found their prejudices melting away. Martha became a frequent visitor, checking on Hope's development and declaring her to be thriving. The neighbor women brought meals and baby clothes, offering advice and support. Even those who had been most vocally opposed to Kara and Brennan's union softened when they saw the obvious love and care the couple lavished on their daughter. Hope grew quickly, strong and healthy despite the concerns about her mixed heritage. She had her mother's strength and her father's curiosity, getting into everything as soon as she learned to crawl. She was equally comfortable with humans and orcs, seeing no difference between the various residents of the way station and the human neighbors who came to visit. On Hope's first birthday, Brennan and Kara threw a party that brought together everyone who had supported them over the years. The elderly vegetable vendor brought a beautiful cake. Thomas came with a hand-carved wooden toy. The minister offered a prayer of blessing for the child. It was a celebration not just of Hope's first year of life, but of everything Kara and Brennan had built together. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Kara stood in the yard holding Hope, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Brennan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around both of them. "Can you believe how far we have come?" he asked softly. "From that day in the market when you followed me home." "Sometimes it feels like a dream," Kara admitted. "Like I will wake up and still be that desperate girl with nothing but a bowl and a few coins." "It is not a dream," Brennan said firmly. "This is real. We made this real through love and stubbornness and a refusal to give up." and we are going to keep making it real every single day for the rest of our lives. Kara leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body and the weight of their daughter in her arms. "I followed you home that day because you were kind to me," she said. "I did not know it then, but you were leading me to everything I had ever wanted and never thought I could have. You gave me a reason to live again," Brennan said. "You took a broken man and showed him that there was still joy to be found in the world. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift." Hope made a small sound in her sleep, and they both looked down at her, marveling at the tiny miracle they had created together. She was proof that love could bridge even the deepest divides, that kindness could triumph over prejudice, that two people from different worlds could build something beautiful together. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Kara and Brennan carried their daughter inside, closing the door on the day and looking forward to all the tomorrows that stretched before them. They had faced so much together: exile and prejudice, arson and hatred, fear and uncertainty. But they had also found love and acceptance, community and purpose. They had built a home not just for themselves, but for others who needed it. They had created a family that defied easy categorization, but was no less real for its unconventional nature. The way station continued to grow over the years, becoming a beacon of hope for displaced orcs throughout the region. Some stayed only briefly before moving on to new lives. Others settled permanently in the area, drawn by the example of acceptance that Kara and Brennan had modeled. Slowly, gradually, the frontier town of Millbrook became known as a place where humans and orcs could live side by side, where differences were acknowledged but not used as weapons, where love was celebrated regardless of the form it took. Hope grew into a bright, confident child who moved easily between the two worlds of her heritage. She learned orc songs and traditions from her mother, and human skills and knowledge from her father. She was beloved by the residents of the way station and the children in town alike, a living embodiment of the possibility of harmony between the two peoples. When Hope was 3 years old, Kara and Brennan welcomed a son into the family. They named him Brennan Jr., though everyone called him Ben. He had his father's brown eyes and his mother's pointed ears, and he was just as much a handful as his sister had been. The family of 4 filled the homestead with laughter and noise, and Brennan often joked that he had never been so exhausted or so happy in his life. The years passed in a blur of seasons and milestones. Birthdays and harvest festivals, winters by the fire and summers working in the fields. The original simple homestead expanded to include the way station building, a larger barn, and additional outbuildings. The property that had once housed only a lonely widower now bustled with life and activity. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Brennan surprised Kara with a gift, a hand-bound book filled with his own writing. "I have been working on this for months," he explained as she turned the pages with wondering eyes. "It is our story, how we met, how we fell in love, how we built all of this. I wanted to write it down so that our children, and their children, will always know what we had to overcome and why it was worth it." Kara read through the book with tears streaming down her face, reliving every moment of their journey together. When she finished, she set it aside carefully and pulled Brennan into a fierce embrace. "It is perfect," she whispered, "just like you, just like this life we have built." "Not perfect," Brennan corrected gently, "but real and ours, that is what matters." As their children grew older, Kara and Brennan made sure they understood the history that had shaped their parents' relationship. They told them about the prejudice and fear that still existed in some corners of the world, but also about the kindness and acceptance they had found in Millbrook. They taught them to be proud of both halves of their heritage, to stand tall in the face of ignorance, and to always lead with love rather than hate. Hope, in particular, seemed to take these lessons to heart. By the time she was 10 years old, she was already talking about her plans to expand the way station's mission, to create a network of safe houses throughout the frontier where displaced orcs could find help and support. Brennan and Kara encouraged her dreams, proud of the passionate and compassionate young woman she was becoming. The community continued to evolve as well. What had started as a handful of people willing to look past their prejudices grew into a genuine movement toward integration and acceptance. Interspecies marriages, while still rare, were no longer unheard of. Orc children attended school alongside human children. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable slowly began to crumble. Of course, there were still challenges. Not everyone was willing to change, and there were pockets of resistance that flared up periodically. But each time hatred reared its ugly head, the community came together to push back, united in their commitment to the principles of tolerance and understanding that Kara and Brennan had championed. On a crisp autumn morning, 10 years after that fateful day when Kara had followed Brennan home from the market, they stood together on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Hope was teaching Ben how to track animals, demonstrating the skills her mother had taught her. Their laughter carried on the breeze, bright and carefree. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you had not dropped that coin in my bowl?" Kara asked, leaning into Brennan's warmth. "All the time," Brennan admitted. "And then I stop thinking about it because it makes my chest hurt to imagine a life without you in it." "I almost did not follow you that day," Kara said. "I almost just took the coin and stayed where I was. What if I had made that choice instead?" "But you did not," Brennan said firmly. "You took a chance. You trusted your instincts, and because of that, both of our lives are immeasurably richer." Kara turned to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "You saved me," she said, "not just from starvation or exposure. You saved me from believing that I was unworthy of love and acceptance. You showed me that kindness still existed in the world. You gave me a reason to hope." "We saved each other," Brennan corrected, covering her hands with his own. "I was just existing before you came into my life, going through the motions without really living. You reminded me what it felt like to be truly alive. You gave me purpose and joy and a future worth fighting for." They stood together in comfortable silence for a while, watching their children and marveling at the life they had created. It had not been easy. There had been times when it would have been simpler to give up, to let fear and prejudice win. But they had chosen to fight, chosen to love, chosen to build something beautiful in the face of opposition. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting golden light across their land, Kara thought about all the people who had found refuge at the way station over the years. She thought about the families that had formed, the friendships that had blossomed, the lives that had been changed. She thought about the ripple effects of one small act of kindness, how Brennan dropping a coin in her bowl had set in motion a chain of events that had transformed an entire community. "I want to do more," she said suddenly. "The way station is wonderful, but I think we can expand. Maybe create a school specifically for half-orc children or a trading post that facilitates commerce between human and orc communities. There is so much more we could do." Brennan smiled, that warm smile that still made her heart skip a beat even after all these years. "Then we will do it," he said. "Together, like we do everything. We will keep building and growing and creating change. We will keep showing the world that love is stronger than hate, that understanding can triumph over fear." "Together," Kara echoed, and the word felt like a promise, a vow renewed. That evening, after the children were asleep and the way station residents had retired to their quarters, Kara and Brennan sat together by the fire as they had done countless times before. Brennan pulled out his journal and began writing, documenting the events of the day. Kara picked up her needlework, adding to the tapestry she had been creating that told the story of their family in thread and color. "You remember what you said to me that first day in the barn?" Kara asked. "When we kissed for the first time during the blizzard." "I said a lot of things that day," Brennan replied, looking up from his writing. "You said maybe it did not have to end badly, that maybe we could figure this out together." Kara set down her needlework. "You were right. We figured it out. We are still figuring it out." "And it did not end badly at all." "It has not ended at all," Brennan pointed out. "We have decades ahead of us if fortune smiles. Decades to keep building, keep loving, keep making a difference." "Good," Kara said softly. "Because I plan to spend every single one of those decades by your side, fighting for the world we want our children to inherit." Brennan set aside his journal and moved to sit beside her, pulling her close. "I cannot imagine wanting to be anywhere else," he said. "You are my home, Kara. You and our children and this life we have built. Everything else is just details." They sat together as the fire burned low. Two people from different worlds who had found their way to each other through chance and choice, through kindness and courage, through love that refused to be constrained by prejudice or fear. They had taken a moment of connection, a coin dropped in a bowl. A person followed home and transformed it into something lasting and beautiful. Outside, the night was peaceful. The way station stood as a beacon in the darkness, its windows glowing warm and welcoming. In the barn, the animals slept soundly. In their beds, Hope and Ben dreamed of adventures yet to come. And in the main house, Kara and Brennan held each other close, grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them to this moment. The frontier was a harsh place, full of dangers and challenges. But it was also a place of opportunity, where old rules could be rewritten and new possibilities could take root. Kara and Brennan had proven that love could flourish even in unlikely soil, that barriers could be broken down one kindness at a time, that the future did not have to be bound by the mistakes of the past. As they finally headed to bed, hands clasped together, Kara paused to look back at the fire one last time. In its flickering light, she could almost see the ghost of her younger self, desperate and alone, following a stranger home because she had nowhere else to go. She wanted to reach back through time and tell that frightened girl that everything would be all right, that the kindness of one man would change her entire world, that love would find her even when she was not looking for it. But perhaps that younger Kara had already known on some level. Perhaps that was why she had followed Brennan home in the first place, some deep instinct telling her that this person, this moment mattered, that this was the beginning of something important. "Come to bed," Brennan said gently, tugging her toward their room. "Tomorrow is another day of building our future. We should rest while we can." Kara followed him willingly, climbing into the bed they shared and curling into his warmth. "I love you," she murmured, already half asleep. "Thank you for dropping that coin in my bowl. Thank you for letting me follow you home." "Thank you for following," Brennan replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger. Thank you for loving me despite all the reasons you had not to." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. They had built something strong and true, something that would outlast them and continue to grow long after they were gone. They had proven that hope could take root even in the harshest conditions, that love could bridge the deepest divides, that one small act of kindness could change the world. And it had all started with a coin dropped in a bowl, and an orc girl brave enough to follow a stranger home. The years continued to roll forward, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives must. There were winters that tested their resources, summers that brought abundant harvests. There were births and deaths, arrivals and departures. The way station saw hundreds of souls pass through its doors, each one leaving changed by the experience of unconditional acceptance. Hope grew into a formidable young woman, inheriting her mother's strength and her father's compassion. By the time she was 16, she was running much of the way station's operations herself, freeing Kara and Brennan to focus on the expansion projects they had dreamed about. Ben, quieter and more scholarly than his sister, developed a passion for documenting Orc history and culture, spending hours interviewing way station residents and preserving their stories for future generations. The school for half-orc children opened when Hope was 18, funded by donations from throughout the region. It was a beautiful building, light and airy, with classrooms designed to honor both human and orc educational traditions. Hope served as one of the first teachers, her unique perspective as someone who straddled both worlds making her particularly effective at helping students navigate their dual heritage. The trading post came next, a neutral ground where humans and orcs could conduct business without fear or prejudice. It started small, but grew quickly as people realized the value of cooperation. Orc craftsmen discovered markets for their metalwork and leather goods. Human merchants found eager customers for their textiles and preserved foods. Trade that had once been conducted in secret or through intermediaries now happened openly, fostering understanding and mutual respect. Through it all, Kara and Brennan remained the steady heart of the community. They were the ones people came to for advice, for mediation, for comfort. They had earned respect not through force or manipulation, but through consistent kindness and unwavering commitment to their principles. They had shown, through the example of their own lives, that a better world was possible if people were willing to work for it. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the community threw them a surprise celebration. Nearly 200 people gathered at the way station, humans and orcs mingling freely, sharing food and music and stories. The elderly vegetable vendor, now ancient but still sharp as a tack, gave a speech about how Kara and Brennan had changed the region for the better. Thomas, who had become an unlikely ally over the years, presented them with a hand-carved plaque declaring them honorary founders of New Millbrook, the integrated community that had grown up around the original town. Kara stood before the assembled crowd, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support. 20 years ago, she said, her voice carrying across the gathering, I was a desperate exile with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I followed a stranger home because he had shown me the smallest kindness, and that decision changed my entire life. Brennan gave me hope when I had none. He gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. He gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to believe in the future. But more than that, he showed me that people could change, that prejudice could be overcome, that love really could conquer hate. Everything we have built here, all of you who have joined us in creating this community, you are proof that one act of kindness can create ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. She paused, looking at Brennan with such love that many in the crowd had to wipe tears from their eyes. My husband likes to say that we saved each other, and that is true. But I think we also saved something bigger than ourselves. We saved the possibility of a different future. We proved that humans and orcs do not have to be enemies, that our children can grow up in a world where who they love matters more than what they are. That is the real gift we have been given, not just our love for each other, but the chance to make a difference in the world. The applause was thunderous. People rushed forward to embrace them, to share their own stories of how the way station had changed their lives. It was a celebration not just of a marriage, but of a movement, a transformation, a revolution built on compassion rather than violence. Late that night, after the last guest had departed and the children had collapsed into exhausted sleep, Kara and Brennan walked together through their property. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light across the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. They walked past the original house, now expanded to accommodate their growing family. They walked past the way station building, dark and quiet now but full of life and hope. They walked past the school and the trading post, monuments to everything they had accomplished. Finally, they stopped at the fence line where Kara had first hesitated all those years ago, uncertain whether to follow Brennan onto his property. Kara leaned against the fence post, looking back at the compound of buildings they had created. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if things had been different?" she asked. "If your neighbors had succeeded in driving us apart, if we had given up when things got hard." "I try not to," Brennan admitted. "Because even imagining a life without you feels like losing something precious. But I suppose if I had to answer, I would say that our lives would have been smaller. Safer, perhaps, but smaller. We would not have touched as many lives. We would not have created all of this." He gestured at the buildings before them. "We would have missed out on something extraordinary." "I was so afraid at the beginning," Kara said softly. "Afraid to hope, afraid to believe that things could be different. Every time something good happened, I waited for it to be taken away. It took me years to really trust that this was real, that you loved me not despite what I was but including all of what I was." "I fell in love with you completely," Brennan said. "Not just the parts that were easy or convenient, but all of you. Your strength and your stubbornness, your compassion and your courage, your green skin and your pointed ears and your fierce determination to make the world better even when the world did not want to change. How could I not love someone who faced down a burning barn to save my animals? Who stood by me even when doing so put her in danger? Who took her own pain and turned it into a mission to help others?" Kara turned to face him, reaching up to touch his face. It bore more lines now than it had 20 years ago, and his dark hair was threaded with silver. But his eyes held the same warmth, the same steady kindness that had drawn her to him in the first place. "We are getting old," she said with a small smile. "Speak for yourself." "I am in my prime," Brennan joked, then grew more serious. "But yes, time is passing. Our children are nearly grown. The way station is well established and can run without us if needed. I find myself thinking about what comes next, about the legacy we want to leave." "The legacy is already there," Kara said, gesturing back at the buildings. "It is in every person we have helped, every mind we have changed, every child growing up in a more accepting world than the one we were born into. It is in Hope and Ben, who have never known a world where love between humans and orcs was impossible. It is in the stories people will tell about the orc woman who followed a human home and started a revolution. A quiet revolution," Brennan said, "built on daily kindness and steady persistence rather than grand gestures and dramatic moments." "The best kind of revolution," Kara agreed. "The kind that lasts." They stood together in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of their farm. Finally, Brennan spoke again. "I want to write another book," he said. "A history of the way station and everything we have accomplished. Not just our story, but the stories of everyone who has passed through here. A record of how change happens, one person at a time." "I think that is a wonderful idea," Kara said. "And I will help you. We can interview people together, collect their stories, preserve them for future generations. Our children should know the full scope of what was built here, and why it mattered." They sealed the decision with a kiss, still as sweet and meaningful as their first kiss in the barn during that long-ago blizzard. Then they walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to rest before beginning another day of the life they had built together. The book project consumed them for the next 2 years. They traveled throughout the region, tracking down former way station residents and recording their experiences. They filled dozens of journals with stories of transformation and hope, of people who had found acceptance when the world had rejected them, of families formed across the divides of species and culture. Hope and Ben contributed their own perspectives, offering insight into what it meant to grow up as half-orcs in a changing world. Other mixed heritage children added their voices as well, creating a chorus of experiences that painted a complex picture of progress and challenges still to be faced. When the book was finally complete, they arranged for it to be published and distributed throughout the frontier. The response was overwhelming. People who had been skeptical of integration read the first-hand accounts and found their perspectives shifting. Young people who had grown up in prejudiced households discovered that there were alternative ways of viewing the world. Scholars and historians recognized the book as an important document, a record of social change that would be studied for generations. But more important than the public acclaim was the personal impact. Kara and Brennan received hundreds of letters from people telling them how the book had changed their lives, how it had given them courage to challenge injustice in their own communities, how it had helped them see others with more compassion and understanding. Each letter was a small confirmation that their work had mattered, that the choice to love across boundaries had created ripples far beyond what they could have imagined. As they entered their 60s, Kara and Brennan began to slow down. They handed over more and more of the way station's operations to Hope and Ben, trusting their children to carry forward the mission they had started. They spent their days working in the garden, reading together, and enjoying the quiet companionship of a long and deeply satisfying marriage. They watched with pride as Hope married a kind human man who worked as a teacher at the school for half-orc children. They celebrated when Ben published his first book of collected orc histories, a groundbreaking work that challenged many human assumptions about orc culture. They welcomed grandchildren into the world, marveling at the ease with which these young ones moved between human and orc communities, never questioning their right to belong in both. One crisp autumn morning, exactly 30 years after Kara had followed Brennan home from the market, they stood together on their porch and watched the sun rise over the compound they had built. Kara leaned heavily on Brennan's arm now, her body showing the effects of age and hard work. Brennan's hair was completely silver, and he moved more slowly than he once had. But their love was as strong as ever, weathered and deepened by decades of partnership. 30 years, Kara said softly. Can you believe it has been 30 years? Some days it feels like it happened yesterday, Brennan replied. Other days, I cannot remember what life was like before you. The lonely years before you came are just a blur. You are my clearest memory, my most vivid reality. I think about that girl I was, Kara said. Sitting in the marketplace with her bowl, hopeless and desperate. I wish I could go back and tell her that everything would be all right, that kindness would find her, that she would build something beautiful beyond her wildest dreams. She became you, Brennan said simply. That girl did not disappear. She grew stronger. She grew wiser. She took her pain and transformed it into purpose. You are everything she hoped to be and more. Kara turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her green hands. I love you, she said. I have loved you for 30 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left. You are my home, my partner, my heart. Everything good in my life flows from the moment you dropped that coin in my bowl and I decided to follow you. And I love you, Brennan replied, his eyes bright with emotion despite the tears. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me purpose and joy and a legacy I am proud of. There is nothing I would change about our journey together. Every hardship was worth it. Every challenge made us stronger. I would do it all again, 1,000 times over, just to end up here with you. They kissed as the sun crested the horizon, bathing them in golden light. It was a kiss that held 30 years of love and laughter, of tears and triumphs, of ordinary moments and extraordinary accomplishments. It was a kiss that promised whatever days remained would be spent together, side by side, united in the bond they had forged through choice and courage and unwavering commitment. Behind them, the way station was coming to life. Residents emerged from their quarters, heading to breakfast and their daily tasks. At the school, teachers arrived early to prepare lessons. At the trading post, merchants set up their wares for another day of cross-cultural commerce. The community they had built hummed with life and activity, a testament to the power of one small kindness multiplied across decades. Hope appeared on the porch, now a woman in her late 20s with her own children. "Good morning," she said, coming to stand beside her parents. "The grandchildren want to know if you will tell them the story today, the story of how you met." Kara and Brennan exchanged a look, both smiling. They had told that story countless times over the years, to their children, to way station residents, to curious visitors. But it never got old, that tale of desperation and hope, of a coin dropped in a bowl and a girl brave enough to follow a stranger home. "Of course we will," Brennan said. "Gather them in the sitting room after breakfast. We will tell them how their grandmother followed their grandfather all the way home, and how that one decision changed everything." As Hope went to round up the grandchildren, Kara leaned into Brennan's embrace, feeling the solid strength of him despite his age. "We built something good," she said. "Something that will last long after we are gone." "We built something extraordinary," Brennan corrected. "And we did it together, one day at a time, one kindness at a time, one choice at a time. That is how revolutions happen, you know. Not in grand gestures, but in small moments of courage and compassion." They went inside to tell their story one more time, to pass on the lessons they had learned, to ensure that the next generation understood the power of choosing love over fear, acceptance over prejudice, hope over despair. And as they spoke, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, by the community they had built through decades of dedication and sacrifice, Kara thought about that frightened girl sitting in the marketplace all those years ago. She thought about the sound of a coin clinking into a wooden bowl. She thought about the moment of decision, when she could have stayed where she was or followed a stranger into an unknown future. She thought about all the times she could have given up, turned back, accepted defeat. But she had not. She had kept moving forward, kept choosing love, kept believing that a better world was possible. And now, 3 decades later, surrounded by proof that her faith had been justified, Kara understood that the best decisions were often the scariest ones. That taking a chance on kindness, even when you had every reason to be cynical, could open doors to possibilities you never imagined. That love could grow in the most unlikely soil and flourish beyond all expectation. She reached for Brennan's hand as she spoke, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. His grip was warm and strong and familiar, an anchor in the continuing story of their lives. And as she looked into his eyes and saw her own love reflected back at her, Kara knew with absolute certainty that following him home had been the best decision she had ever made. Not just because it had saved her life, though it had. Not just because it had given her love and family and purpose, though it had done all those things, but because it had shown her that transformation was possible, that people could change, that the world could be made better through the persistent application of compassion and courage. Their story was more than just a romance, though it was certainly that. It was a testimony to the power of human connection, to the revolutionary potential of simple kindness, to the way one small choice could echo through generations. It was proof that love could bridge any divide, overcome any obstacle, transform any heart that was willing to be changed. And as the morning sun filled the room with warmth and light, as the grandchildren listened with rapt attention to the tale they had heard many times before but never tired of, Kara squeezed Brennan's hand and smiled. Their story would continue long after they were gone, told and retold, inspiring others to take chances on kindness, to choose love over fear, to follow strangers home when their instincts told them it was the right thing to do. It had started with a coin in a bowl. It had grown into a revolution. And it would endure, generation after generation, as long as people remembered the simple truth at its heart, that we are all more alike than different, that compassion costs nothing but means everything, and that love, true love, knows no boundaries of species or culture or circumstance. That was their legacy. That was their gift to the world. And that was why, 30 years later, Kara had never once regretted the decision to follow a kind stranger all the way home.